Theresa here. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to be doing a VR to Marlon and Theresa's tag, Tarot to the Extreme. I have been wanting to do this one for a while and I'm finally getting to it. So thanks for all of you for being patient, because I know this is one that a lot of you expressed interest in seeing. But I have to tell you, I went to pull my decks for this tag last night as I was setting up for things I was going to film today. And I really struggled with a couple of these categories. I will definitely let you know when we get there. But this is a super fun tag. As I said, it was created by Marlon and Theresa. I will have her channel linked down below. A link to the specific video that started this tag. She's been making lots of great content lately, and I definitely recommend you check her channel out. She is a personal friend of mine, and she is amazing. I love her. So let's get into the categories. So it's the whole premise of this tag that Marlon created was to show extreme sort of polar opposites in a way of decks from your collection. So the first category is Minimalist versus Maximalist. So for my Minimalist deck, and I don't know that these even like, if there's things about this that are not minimalist, but is the Fortuna Tarot. This is the Amethyst Aura edition, and this is such a beautiful deck. I do not often crave minimalist decks, and there's hollow foil on it. Like, I guess that's not very minimalist, but it's minimalist in the sense that it's very sigil based with lots of empty space on the card. It's monochromatic, obviously. Well, kind of. What do you call hollow foil being the only color? I mean, it's purple in the background, so I guess that makes it monochromatic, but then there's rainbows in the foil. It's beautiful. There's actually a newer edition of this deck that was funded on Kickstarter. What was it called? Opal? I think something opal. And it's beautiful. It's got like this pinky, purpley, salmony, I don't know how to describe it, but it's pretty. This is very minimalist and it's gorgeous, but it feels very magical to me. There's something very otherworldly, and it looks really, really stunning by candlelight. So that is the Fortuna Tarot for my minimalist deck. For my Maximalist, is that how you call it? Maximalist? For my Maximalist deck, I am not alone in choosing the Spirit Keeper's Tarot by Burnaby. This is the Revelations Edition. It's Maximalist. I have not even worked with it yet. This particular edition especially, I think, is Maximalist. Burnaby reworked this deck to include so much stuff. Mine's still like literally in order with all the goodies on top. But she has included so many influences from cultures all around the globe. It's absolutely breathtaking, and there is so much on the cards. It feels like a class. Like, it's absolutely stunning, but it's so much. It's so much. And I did rehome my first edition after spending a ton of good quality time with it. And I really loved my time with the Spirit Keeper's Tarot. It took me to some really interesting, unique places. This one is just sort of sitting, waiting, but for me to really dedicate more time to it, because one of the things that really makes it maximalist and also really excites me is the Book of Maps for this edition, which is huge. I did have the Book of Maps for the first edition, but this has gotten more comprehensive, if you can imagine, and is also in full color, which is really exciting. But I mean, this is beefier than most of my textbooks were in college. So, you know, it's a whole thing. But I mean, Burnaby is nothing if not incredibly generous with her knowledge and her time. And I mean, talk about a magnum opus that this is. I just can't. It's just a whole thing. So very maximalist, but I highly respect it. I just have not had time to dig into it. So I don't care if it sits for years at this point, I think. I'm just going to let it be a thing that happens when it happens, but I really do want to properly study this deck. So that's my maximalist choice. Okay, the next category is daytime versus nighttime, and I really struggled with this because my nighttime deck also fit another category perfectly. So I decided to, instead of think about what deck I would maybe use in the day and what deck I would maybe use at night, I went with decks that take place entirely during the day and another one that takes place entirely at night. So for that, my daytime deck is the Alice Tarot, and my nighttime deck is the Intuitive Night Goddess Tarot. So the Alice Tarot was the first one that sprung to mind when I thought of a daylight-focused deck. The Alice Tarot, I was like, I don't think there's a single scene in the Alice Tarot that takes place at night, and was I right? I love the Alice Tarot, but it is very beautiful sunny afternoon setting, right? Like, all the cards are this beautiful, sunny, cloudy but sunny, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful day kind of energy. And I think it's because, of course, all in a golden afternoon. Like, that is the premise of the story. And I love the gold foiling in this deck. There's the, not gold foiling, the cold foil stamping in this deck, because it's not quite as heavy as it is in some of Baba Studio's other decks. So it adds this beautiful glint of light, but doesn't interfere with the images. Like, I don't struggle to see what's on the cards. And sometimes that is the case with some of the other cold foil stamping on some of the other decks. So this one is just, it's just beautiful. I fell in love with Baba Studio's decks because of this one. I love it, and I love the daytime vibes. So yeah, if I need a deck that's going to connect me with the daytime energy, this is definitely it. But I mean, to be fair, most of my readings are during the day. Actually, I guess that's not true. I do a lot of readings at night in the wintertime, but yeah, I don't know. Anyway, this is definitely a daytime deck. But the Intuitive Night Goddess Tarot takes place like exclusively at night, which is super cool. I mean, like, it's in the title. I'm pretty sure I'm not the only one that picked this in answer to this tag, but it has this beautiful night garden energy. In fact, in some ways, it makes me feel like I'm in amidst the stars, not just at night, but that this is some sort of otherworldly place, like in the literal sky. And, you know, it gives me those vibes. It feels very spacious and very cosmic, which I know was its intention. But it really is a lovely and nurturing deck. And I think it goes its own way in some really unique places, which I adore. But yeah, very much a night setting deck. That is the Intuitive Night Goddess Tarot. Okay, next up is Best Shuffle and Worst Shuffle. Let's see if you know what these decks are. My best shuffle is any linen deck. I'm not the first one to say this, but this is a deck that I also really wanted to put in the underrated category, but I'm going to mention it here, but just know that it's also an underrated deck. I think there's a version of this currently funding on Kickstarter in this linen version, but this was actually a prototype deck, and the first edition of the Little Odd Tarot, when it was actually produced for Kickstarter, was produced in a thicker matte cardstock with colored edges. But this version, this linen version, this is how the creator initially envisioned the deck, but there were some funding issues the first time around, and they went a different route. But linen cardstock, y'all. And this is the one that, well, I say currently funding, but that's at the time I'm filming, and I don't know when this video is going up. So it might have just been on Kickstarter, but I will link where you can buy or keep an eye out for the linen version of this deck. But it is such a great shuffle. Now, I'm pretty sure that this is very similar, if not the same as the Make Playing Cards linen cardstock, which is really beautiful. It's thin, it's bendy, it feels like playing cards, it shuffles like a dream, but it's not too slippery. I almost put the Expert Playing Card Company printed Playful Heart Tarot in this category, but that deck is just a bit slippery and a bit larger than standard, and those two things, while they're super fine for me, they just add that little tiny extra bit of awkwardness with the shuffle, but it's still a very satisfying shuffle and one of my favorites. But this Little Odd Tarot is just such an easy, breezy, linen, beautiful. I think my first linen cardstock deck ever, though, was the Game of Thrones Tarot, which I still have in the linen cardstock. They don't make it on linen anymore, I don't think, but love that one. It's incredible. It's so good. The shuffle is amazing, but that is the Little Odd Tarot, also underrated. And my worst shuffle, and I know for a fact I'm not the first one to mention this one because I think Sarah at Sunset Bow Tarot also mentioned this as the worst shuffle. This is the Texture Tarot, and it is a long-time favorite deck, but the paper it's on is called Xanta Boxboard, and it's cardboard. It's like cereal box cardboard. It does not have a flex. It is, the creator is very transparent about the cardstock and says right on the listing, on Etsy, that this is not intended for riffle shuffling, which I didn't know when I bought it, probably because I didn't read the description, or maybe it wasn't a disclaimer back then. And I remember trying to riffle shuffle this deck when I first got it, and I did actually crease one of my cards. The crease has worked its way out, I'm pretty sure. Now, I have found a way to very sort of drop very gently and then do that kind of a riffle because I can't freaking help myself, but you cannot bend, flex, bridge. You can't do any of that. It is a really, really lovely slippy overhand shuffle, which is how I mostly shuffle it. And I love this deck with my whole heart. Like, it's an amazing deck. And my first ever collage deck love, I really love it. I really, really love this deck. So I overlooked the cardstock. But I would kill to have this deck in a more shuffleable version. I feel like I just came up with this idea, but I'm pretty sure I heard it somewhere else. But I have toyed with the idea of scanning and having it printed on a different cardstock for myself to make it more usable, but I don't know even how I feel about that. Like, it would be for personal use, but I don't know. I think I'll probably just leave it. It's now become kind of a part of this deck's identity, but gosh, I wish I could riffle it, because I love to riffle. But that is the Textured Tarot. Definitely the worst shuffle in my collection. Not the hardest shuffle, I don't think, but the worst, if that makes any sense. The least satisfying. That is the Textured Tarot. The next category is Confronting versus Comforting. My most confronting deck and my most comforting deck are what are here. So my most confronting deck, the one that I reach for when I want to be confronted specifically, is the Deviant Moon Borderless. I don't think anybody's surprised to see this in this spot in this video. I love that it helps me specifically to see the shadow meaning of the cards. That is the thing I go to this deck for. And it's got a lot of sass, but it's not mean. It's not a mean deck. It's just a this is like, it's like that person you know that if you ask the question, they're going to tell you the truth and you're probably not going to like it, but you ask them because you know you need to hear it. That's this deck for me. And so it's very confronting, but it's always been really great. My most comforting deck is like as opposite this deck as we can possibly get. And it is the Guardian Angel Tarot by Doreen Virtue. This technically was actually the one that just said it was by Radley Valentine. It was originally by both of them, I guess. But I love my mod to this deck, which I snirked directly from Dawn Michelle, who had done this mod first, where she took the gilding off and then did pastel colors. Yeah, addicted. This deck is also, I really struggled because I didn't want to put repeats, but this is also my bedtime deck. Like, this really is a nighttime deck for me. This is the deck that I like to put next to the bed if I'm going through a period of stress, and I'll pull a card before bed for a little peaceful, comforting message before I go to sleep. I love this deck for that. It's the primary way I've used it over the years, but it is my most comforting deck. So I felt like it fit the best in this category. There is not another deck in my collection that feels comforting like this. I have other decks that feel like they'll give me a pep talk, like they'll tell me to pick myself up, dust myself off, but this one literally is a hug in a deck. And this is out of print now. If you see this, make sure that if you decide to buy it, that you're buying a legitimate copy, because most of the copies of this deck I see now are counterfeits. So just be aware of that. Look out for deck that looks small. This is a very big, chunky deck, and look out for things like no guidebook, big red flag. Anyway, this is absolutely not my aesthetic. This reminds me of something like my grandma or my mom would have had, which is why I resisted decks like this for so long, but working with this has been such a gentle, loving delight. I just really, really, really enjoy it, and I never thought I would have, but it's a deck I actually reach for a lot when I feel like I need that hug. It's very much a self-care kind of hug deck for me. That's what the backings look like. I think there was originally, no, I guess there wasn't really a border at all. I think it was just that it was gilded before. Anyway, really beautiful. I mean, like, it's tacky in every possible way, but lovely at the same time. My most comforting, though, for sure. The next category is the everyday deck versus the every so often deck. So my everyday deck and my every so often deck. This is not a surprise, I don't think. This Might Hurt Tarot is the one I call my Desert Island deck. Like, over the Mons Tarot, if I could only have one deck for the rest of my life, if I was stuck with one, for years it has been this one. That would be that one, because it's my all-purpose deck. It's the one that I can use for any type of reading in any type of situation. I'm really bonded to it. I love it. It's got a bit of a cartoon style that I really love. I love the shading and the color. I love the scenes. I love the way the cards are depicted. I'm just really attached, and I know this deck backwards and forward. It's very much a home deck for me in a way that at one time only the Osho Zen could be. This one feels like I can read for anybody with it. And with the Mons Tarot, I really feel like I like to read for myself with it and only occasionally other people. So there's that. But I really, 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 really love this deck. So this is definitely a deck that I can reach for every day. I don't, but I can. And I feel like, again, if I could only have one, this would be the one. And this is the one and only deck I have a backup copy of. And I will say I'm very resistant to buying backups. I never have intentionally purchased a backup of a deck. However, I was very generously gifted a backup of this deck with the pearl holographic edges, and it is literally sitting on my dresser in my closet, just for when this one falls apart, because this one already has some peeling cards and it's definitely taken a lot of wear. So I do have a backup and I'm so grateful to have it, but it is cards, it's paper. Like I feel like if a deck ever dies, I'll just get a different deck. But this is one where I am really, truly grateful to have a backup. I don't think I still would have purchased it for myself, but it was the sweetest gift and I'm so grateful for it. But this is definitely an everyday deck for me. Every so often, though, I really love working with the Dark Goddess Tarot. This is never a deck that I would use every day, that I would whip out for just any question. And I typically will work with this deck one card at a time, with very rare exceptions. I would say possibly a 3-card spread, or if I was going to do a big spread, it'd be something like the year ahead spread, where I would pull 12 cards, one for each month, and I would work with that goddess energy for that month. When I went through the actual year. In fact, I did not know that, okay, I'm getting flack for how I pronounce this word, so I'm just going to stick with what I know, which is Kalyak, but I've heard it's pronounced elsewise differently. I don't know. Anyway, I'm still working on it. But I did not know she was in here, actually. That's so interesting that she's near the top. Anyway, I really think this is an incredible deck, and I did go and purchase the mass market version. This is the independent version of the deck, which I love. I went ahead and purchased the mass market version for the book, and I sent the cards to Danny. So Danny has the cards, and I have the book from the mass market set. Now you can use the app, which is what I did for a long, long, long time, to have the full text of the guidebook. You don't need to buy the mass market for it, but I really like having physical guidebooks, so that's a blessing. Yeah, now I kind of really want to do this, use this deck for my year ahead for 2022. I bet you I'm going to forget, though. I'm probably going to forget that I want to do that, but I think it would be really neat to do. But this deck is the kind of deck that it feels like its messages are very big, profound, and it's easier to work with. I just noticed all these grays are a little different in the borders. I don't know if you guys can tell, but anyway, I feel like this deck is easier to work with in small doses, and it is very much an every so often kind of deck. So yeah, anyway. Really, really love it. And I've always had really meaningful readings with this deck. It's just something that I'd only pull out for occasions. You know, it's like the tag says, an every so often kind of deck. This next category, I struggled and struggled and struggled and struggled with, because it is underrated or overrated and underrated. Because here's the thing, I tend to cull decks. So if I feel like a deck is overrated, I typically don't keep it. And so I had to really, 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 really think about what I could possibly still have in my hands that is overrated. And it was made even worse by the fact that I have recently sort of mostly cleared my purgatory. So I don't actually have a lot of decks in purgatory that I would feel comfortable. And even some of those, I wouldn't call them overrated. This next one I will, but from my own personal perspective, I think it gets a lot of hype, and I don't personally get it, and I bought it because of all of that hype. It's kind of a FOMO purchase for me, but I think I'll call it overrated. I think that's fair, but I will say the deck itself seems to be very, very well done, and it seems to be of good quality, and the art is good and all that kind of stuff. For me, it's overrated, and it's the Victorian Romantic. I was very excited to get this in. I think it's beautiful. I have zero desire to work with it, which I should have known, but I knew this was going to be the last printing, or at least the last printing for a long, long, long time. And I didn't want to miss out, you know? So very much, literally, fear of missing out. But I can't work with it. I can't work with it. And it's not that it's not a well thought out deck. I love Baba Studios decks. They're incredibly well thought out. I bought the separate guidebook. It's very comprehensive. You will not want for information. My issue with this deck is twofold. It slightly bores me, which is a personal issue, right? It's like not my taste. It's just not to my taste. So it slightly bores me. But besides that, the cold foil stamping on this deck is so, there you go. You see how much glare it reflects? Which actually, if it's not in the perfect lighting, makes it really hard to look at. I feel like there's so much cold foiling. And so you saw my Alice Tarot. So let me actually grab that. It's funny because I actually remember when the Alice Tarot came out, this edition that I have, which is I think the most recent edition. When it came out, I remember there being some feedback from people that it seems like it's a little less cold foil stamping than what they normally do. But I think that's why I love it. So like, for example, do you see how there's a little bit around here? There's a tiny bit in her hair and in the bushes, but it's like almost like pointillism, like there's highlights. Whereas in this card, it seems like it's almost like the whole card is sheets of that cold foil. Like it's not solid. It does have a texture to it, but like here in the drum, there's the yellow part of the drum and then the yellow cords, and it all, in the light, it kind of just looks like a wash of yellow. Whereas here, I feel like at no angle do I stop being able to see the card. And it's like that for me through the entire Victorian Romantic. Like as soon as the light gets on it, it just almost gets hard for me to even see what's happening. Like look at how much cold foil stamping. And I mean, that's great. It's shiny and pretty. This is forever now for me, like the Ukraine card. I cannot look at it and not think of the Ukrainian flag. Anyway, but this is just, look at all of that. And it's beautiful, but it's distracting. And I can't, it's so flat that it takes me out of the world. It makes it feel two-dimensional, whereas it wasn't feeling two-dimensional before, but the art is beautiful. I want to like this more, but like here's another example. It's just all, you still get shade. It's not like it's actually flat. Like you get the darker where it's darker, but it's so much. I just can't do it. It pulls me out of the image. So as much as I think this is a beautiful deck, it's definitely overrated for me. And I feel like Danny's Mystic Masters Tarot hits all the same sort of places for me that this deck does, but it's not as distracting for me to look at. So this one for me personally is overrated. But I feel like that term overrated is so tricky, right? Because I'm not dissing the deck as a concept or as a product. It's just not a product that works for me, right? So it's very personal. But for me, this is overrated. Now, I already mentioned and kind of cheated that I feel like the Little Odd Tarot is an underrated deck. But another deck that I feel is underrated, I never hear anybody talking about it. I feel like I only ever saw it on one person's video ever, and that is the Rainbow Heart Tarot. You guys, this deck, it's so great. You know, I hear people talking about like the Hoi Polloi Tarot and stuff, which is a vintage deck, and I get that this is more modern. And I also get that I'm biased because I love bright colors. But I just feel like Rachel Rosencoder, I had to just double check her name. I don't even really use the guidebook. But I feel like she did such an incredible job with this deck. The colors are vibrant, yes, but it's got this funky kind of, a little bit of hippie, but it's so bold and gorgeous and unique. And the perspective's a little different in a lot of the cards. And I just think this is super underrated. Like I said, I don't hear anybody talking about it. There are a few cards in here, I suppose, that I think could cause people issue. The moon has like a vulva, which could be like tricky for some people for sure. So there's that. I can definitely see it's not going to be for everybody. I just wish more people loved it. Like, look at this death card. It's just so stinking good. I cannot get enough of it. I love it so much. And I love it and always want to reach for it. In fact, since I've gotten it, which, gosh, it's been at least a couple years now, I think, it's hung on my favorites rack in my room. It's just always one that I want close at hand. The only reason it doesn't get more use, which I've mentioned before, is because it's a little larger than standard tarot. So if I book a client reading, I will tend to, this is another card that people don't love, but I love it. I get it. It makes sense to me. But the reason it doesn't get more play is because it is bigger. And so for a bigger spread, it just doesn't fit. But I love this. Look at this. This is another Three of Wands. Embark. I love it. I love it. This makes me happy. Sorry, my point with that, I don't think I even made sense. Hold on. Let me go back. Embark is my personal keyword for the Three of Wands. I want to see that we're on our way. And not a lot of decks kind of illustrate that well, in my opinion. So I really liked that. But anyway, I love it. I mean, it's very RWS, but you can see some symbols. I love that the chakras are here in the Seven of Pentacles, but I mean, it's so great. I really love this deck. And yeah, it just doesn't get a lot of attention. Maybe it's the art style. I don't know, but I love it. I think it's amazing. So yeah, underrated, definitely the Rainbow Heart Tarot. Fantastic. There's our vulva. Definitely not for everybody. I can definitely see that point for sure. I love this Wheel of Fortune too. It's so good. Anyways, I feel like this deck is underrated. I'm pretty sure you can still get it. I will have links down below, but yeah, I love the Rainbow Heart Tarot. And our last category is light work versus shadow work. And I couldn't resist a perfect pair, like a perfectly coordinated pair for this prompt. So I chose for light work the Wisdom of the Divine Feminine And for shadow work, the Wisdom of the Shadow. I'm just staying zoomed in at this point. But I mean, if you missed my walkthrough of these decks, go watch it. It's incredible how these work together in complement specifically to address. Did I put these opposite? Yes. I usually like to put the shadow on the left and the light on the right. So Wisdom of the Shadow, Wisdom of the Divine Feminine. I like to put them in this way because I like to pull the Confronting card and then look at how I deal with that, right? Like, how do I face that thing? And I just think these work so well in complement with one another. They just really are powerful together. Look at this. Grief versus trust. I mean, the pairings with these, it's just, I get so many synchronicities when I use these next to each other. It's astounding. And that happened in my walkthrough in an organic way. It really, really surprised me a lot. And I'm so grateful I have these. I will say the gilding is not wearing the best, but that's really tough. I don't know if you can tell. It's chipping quite a bit, but that's hard with metallic gilding, and especially hard with a dark gilding on a light card because card cores are lighter usually. So it's wearing a bit, but these are fabulous decks. They work really, really well together, and they're perfect, in my opinion, for light and shadow. So that is it, you guys. Those are my Tarot to the Extreme prompt answers. Thank you again to Marlena for the tag. This was a ton of fun to do, even if I did have to agonize a lot. Like when I tell you it took me like over an hour to figure out what deck I had in my collection that was potentially overrated. I mean it. And to be fair, now that I've identified that this is true for myself, this is probably going into purgatory because that's how I roll. Now that I've realized that, yeah, actually this is overrated in my collection, it's probably not going to stay. So that's a thing. So thanks a lot, Marlena. I'm just kidding. Thank you guys so much for watching. This was so much fun. Again, go watch Marlena's response, and she probably has a playlist on her channel where you can watch other people's responses. This has been a really fun tag to watch as well as to do. So thanks so much, Marlena. And to everybody, thank you so much for watching. Extra big thank you goes out to the Unicorn fam. Thank you so much for the support of my channel. That tangible support really means a lot to me, and I can't thank you enough. To everybody who watches and likes and subscribes, thank you. I wouldn't be doing this if you weren't all here engaging with the content. So thank you so much for participating and being a part of it with me. Thank you again, everyone, and may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.